This is my newest obsession, ballpoint pen. In today's video, I'm going to share some helpful tips and tricks for creating amazing drawings using just colored ballpoint pens. This video is inspired by an artist I follow on Instagram, and if you don't know his work, you absolutely must check him out. His name is Nicholas Sanchez, and he creates these mind-blowing masterpieces using just ballpoint pen. I have the set of 3 multicolored pens by Bic, the same ones he uses. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're curious and want to try them too. I decided I would try to fill a small sketchbook with only pen drawings. I mean, if you're going to give a new medium a fair shake, you have to at least do a few drawings with it, right? So stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to give you a never-before-seen sketchbook tour of all my ballpoint pen drawings. Today's demo is on my very last page of my little Paul Rubens journal. I did it! I actually filled a whole sketchbook! Woohoo! Now, why use ballpoint pen? Why not a pencil? I mean, you can't even erase it. Isn't that terrifying? Okay, so I'm a glutton for punishment, but personally, I love the challenge of doing a sketch without the ability to bail myself out with an eraser. Learning to draw quickly and with commitment is an incredible skill that takes lots of practice to master. It forces you to be more intentional, thoughtful, and observant with each mark that you make. Ultimately, that's the goal with every medium, right? To be able to make marks with confidence. Another huge benefit to drawing with pens, aside from the inability to erase, is that it is the lightest and most portable art tool there is aside from a pencil. It's so easy to just throw in a purse or a bag, take it on a plane or a train ride, doodle while you're at the park with your kids, draw something to entertain yourself during a long and boring work meeting. And if you want to create colored art without the hassle of pulling out messy paints, assorted markers, or colored pencils, or any other medium, these multicolored retractable pens are the answer. To demonstrate how I like to use these pens, I'll be drawing this photo of my little niece from when she was about 2.5. Now, I know when you're drawing with a pen for the first time, it can be intimidating. So here are my top tips for helping you get started with this super fun medium. Number 1, use a smooth, high-quality paper. My little Paul Rubens 100% cotton, 140-pound hot-pressed watercolor paper journal is the perfect surface for working with ballpoint pen. It handles tons of layering without ever bleeding through or causing indentations in the paper. These come in a few different sizes, but I recommend starting small since pen art takes patience and it can take a long time just to create a small drawing. This one is 3.8 by 5.2 inches. Since filling this little one up, I'm going to buy another one of these exact same journals because I just love them. Tip number 2, practice on a test sheet of paper first. When you get a new set of paints, it's a good idea to swatch out the colors to get a feel for what they look like on paper. The same is true for a new pen. Make marks, do some scribbles and doodles, adjust your pressure from light to heavy, hold your pen at an angle, test out different ways of coloring. Try shading an area with parallel lines, or use cross-hatching, or even pointillism, which is when you color an area using just dots. You can even create a small color wheel with the colors in rainbow order. Next, try experimenting with different color combinations, layering them on top of each other. Because none of my pens have the color brown, I have to create it by mixing colors on the paper through intentional layers. Even if you know only a little about color theory and color mixing, that will assist you greatly. We know that opposite colors on the color wheel, when combined, tend to neutralize each other and create browns or grays. Here I made 3 different crosshatch swatches that from far away kind of read as brown because of the color combinations used. The first one is multiple crosshatch layers of light green and pink. The second brown is a combo of orange and purple. And the third swatch is dark green and red. Tip number 3, vary your pressure to get different effects. The amazing thing about ballpoint pen is that it responds to pressure almost the same way a pencil does. You can get faint lines with light pressure or very dark lines with heavy pressure. For those of you who are worried about the inability to erase, the key to drawing successfully with ballpoint pens is to start light. The color you choose to start with also helps. For this portrait of my niece, I decided to do the initial sketch with orange since it closely matches her skin tone and looks quite light when applied with a feather light touch. I'm slow and thoughtful with my marks, beginning with general placement and size on the page, the overall contours of the head, and suggestive notes for the facial features. I'm constantly visually comparing distances from one mark to the next, trying to make as many accurate marks as possible from the very beginning. Once you're happy with size and placement, you can begin to more fully commit to your drawing. I switched to pink for the facial features, adding the ears, the neck, the nose, eyes, and mouth. Tip number 4 is to work in layers to mix color. Building up layers in ballpoint pen takes a lot of time, but ultimately this is what will give your drawing the look of depth. Study your reference photo and choose colors that match. Now, after finishing the initial outline of my niece, I began to apply light scribbles of color, starting with this turquoise blue. I used lots of layers of pink, orange, red, and yellow in the skin, but also added in cool tones like blues and black to neutralize some of those warm colors. Like when you're working with watercolors, you need to use the white of the paper for your brightest areas in the drawing. So it's best to work with very light layers of color and build up color and value slowly, planning ahead for where you want those light areas to be. In this reference image, there isn't any pure white in her skin, but you can see that the left side of her face is the brightest area and rather cool in color temperature, leaning more blue. So I used this base layer of blue to make notes for areas of the skin and hair that have cool lights and shadows. I actually really like to do a blue underpainting for portraits when I'm working with watercolors too. If you want to learn more about this technique, check out this video. Tip number 5, use cross-hatching to darken. Cross-hatching is a method of drawing or shading that involves making parallel lines, then crossing those lines with more parallel lines, but in the opposite direction. It should look like woven texture. When you do many layers of cross-hatching, this is how you can darken an area into a pure solid shape. Using lighter pressure and fewer marks will leave an area much lighter. Cross-hatching does not need to consist only of straight lines either. You can allow your lines to curve to match the contours of the cheek, for example. In fact, it's a good idea to imagine the sculptural shape of the thing you're drawing and match your lines to those curves or planes. Notice I didn't really crosshatch in the hair, and that's because parallel lines following the flow of the hair's growth and movement was sufficient. How and when you use this technique really depends on the subject matter and on the character of the shapes that you're trying to draw. I still have so much to learn about this fun medium, but I'm enjoying it so much. So as promised, I'm going to give you a tour of my sketchbook that I finally filled up. Let's take a look. All right, so I used the first page, which is just a black sheet of paper, to do some scribbles. You can kind of see that's where I was testing out my pens to remove any excess ink. The first drawing I did was just with my black, green, blue, and red pen. And that's this portrait of my husband, Blake. He was sitting in front of the TV, actually looking at his phone, and that's the only time I can ever get him to pose for me is when he's watching something. Because I didn't have yellow, I wasn't really able to do any oranges or more accurate skin tones, and brown was a little bit tricky, but with the green and the red and blue combo, kind of using all of my primers, I was able to hint at the look of brown hair, and you can see I used tons of cross-hatching in that skin texture and left some of the white of the paper where the highlights are. This was just a couple days after we got our little corgi puppy. He slept a lot when he was super little, so I caught him in this just adorable pose and had to draw him. Trying to draw children from life, now that's a whole different challenge. This was my son. He sat and was reading a book for maybe 20 minutes and that's all he gave me. He was very wiggly. Now working from a professional model, totally different story. On Wednesday nights, I go to a figure painting group in downtown Denver, and we have so much fun working from models from life. So that's what the next couple examples here are. These are all models from life. This one's just the black pen. Sometimes it's okay to just use one color if that's all you're feeling. I also did a hand study of the same model. I drew this from a photo on my phone while I was on a flight, just using the blue pen. This is Dream Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. I was babysitting my niece and nephew and had just put them to bed, and I decided to sketch this banana from life on my sister's countertop. Here's my first example of using all 3 of these pens with all the different colors. You can see what a difference it makes in the skin tone. Again, this was at my Wednesday night figure group. This was at a conference. I didn't have a lot of time to try to capture the speaker, but I did my best. And here's one I just ran out of time. I was working from this drooping white rose from life and didn't have much time and wasn't able to complete it as much as I would have liked. But it was during a wedding weekend, so you know how that is, busy. This was the first and only landscape I've tried from life in ballpoint pen. I wasn't happy with it while I was doing this drawing, but then when I stepped away and looked at it later, I actually really like it. This is another one I drew while I was on the plane on my way to the Portrait Society conference in Atlanta. This is my little nephew Lance. Isn't he precious? This one was done from life at the Portrait Society conference. Our beautiful model, her name was Danny. She was just so wonderful. And we had a second model at this conference who was dressed up in these kind of old-timey clothes and had this wonderful beard. And here's Danny again in costume. Isn't she magnificent? This was my favorite one. And then this is the one you saw demoed today, and that's my entire sketchbook. Hopefully this video helps remove some of the mystery behind ballpoint pen. It's really amazing. You almost feel like you're playing the role of a printer, just using all of these colors to layer and layer. It's so much fun. I hope you'll give it a try. Thank you for watching. Check out this next video, and I'll see you over there.